Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the video game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, another Amiga mascot platformer, overlooked ninjas, and a home port of an awesome arcade game. Hi, I'm your host, Jared, and today is February 16th, 1994. The mascot arms race continues, since there's still plenty of animals left to exploit. Released this month for the NES, the SNES, and the Game Boy was Alfred Chicken. Alfred Chicken is a side-scrolling platformer. Play as the chicken Alfred as you run and jump through each level. Use his beak to attack enemies and to flip switches. You can also dive bomb in midair to take out enemies or pop balloons, and if you miss, he adorably gets stuck in the ground for a little bit. Find some power-ups, find some secret areas, and pop every balloon in the level to eventually be taken to a boss fight. Defeat the evil mecha chickens and save Alfred's girlfriend. Alfred Chicken was originally developed by Twilight, a UK-based studio specializing in making games for PCs of the time. It was published by Mindscape, the same publisher who also produced the original Shadowgate. I can only assume his name, Alfred Chicken, is a pun on Chicken Alfredo. Gameplay-wise, there's only some slight difference between all the different versions. Besides the obvious graphics, the Super NES version only requires you to find the big balloon to end the level instead of finding all of them. The NES version is the smallest with only 5 levels. And there are actually 2 revisions of the Game Boy game. The original and an updated one released slightly later to utilize the extra features of the Super Game Boy, plus a level select. There was supposed to be a Sega Genesis port that didn't get discovered until 2016 and went cancelled for unknown reasons. In 1993 in the UK, the constituency of Christchurch held a special election following the passing of its Member of Parliament. Turns out, all you need to be on the ballot was a candidate and 500 British pounds. Alfred Chicken was on the ballot, complete with chicken mascot costume to help promote it. He got a grand total of 18 votes. Alfred Chicken took second to last place. It was actually a big enough deal that new legislation was passed that required more signatures to nominate a candidate because of a video game chicken. For the North American release, the stunt wasn't nearly as elaborate. They had a phone number that you could call and you would get to hear a message from Alfred Chicken himself. Just dial 1-800-ALFRED-C. It's more annoying than all those 1-800-collect call commercials from the 90s.
This is Alfred Chicken, Super Alfred Chicken. Thanks for calling, and I'm coming really soon. Really soon. I'm really cool. I'm way cool. Every magazine's talking about me. If you don't have me, you aren't cool. So get me now. Help me find the watering cans. That's a clue, kids. The watering cans. And look out for the mousies. Bye.
Now that you've heard the phone message, you have 7 days to live. So please subscribe. Reviews for the game were generally middling aside from GamePro. They loved the NES version with almost perfect scores. EGM scores ranged from as low as a 5 to as high as an 8. Nintendo Power gave the NES version an average 3.4 out of 5, and the Super NES version a rather low 2.8 out of 5. Since then, Alfred Chicken got another remake in the year 2000 for the Game Boy Color, and then another remake in 2002 for the PlayStation 1, both of which were only released in Europe. Alfred Chicken hasn't been seen since then. If there was one thing people never got fatigue of from the 90s, it was ninjas. And maybe robots. And definitely ninja robots. Released this month for the Super Nintendo was the Ninja Warriors. The Ninja Warriors is a beat-em-up. Choose one of 3 playable ninja robot characters and go from left to right, beating the crap out of every dude that comes your way. Punch, jump kick, and throw to your heart's content. You can also execute certain special moves by inputting commands very similar to a fighting game. You can also fill a power meter to unleash a screen-clearing attack. Ninja your way through 8 levels, defeating a boss at the end of them, and defeat the evil Banglar. Ninja Warriors was developed by Natsume and published by Taito, and is based on the 1987 arcade game The Ninja Warriors, also from Taito. The original arcade game was excellent, and in the late 80s set a new standard for what beat-em-up games should try to achieve, at least until 1989, when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game from Konami came out. Originally titled Ninja Warriors Again in Japan, the Western release wasn't super hyped up since many saw it as just another beat-em-up release. The exception is Game Fan magazine, who did run a full-page preview talking about how impressive it is. They called it easily the best of the genre for the SNES. It's better than the arcade original, and the animation is so smooth, it rivals Capcom's arcade game, The Punisher. Reviewers agreed. It got high marks. GamePro magazine awarded it an almost perfect score, and Electronic Gaming Monthly had an average review score of an 8.2 out of 10, with the Editor's Choice Gold Award. They basically said it's so good and has such impressive graphics, you would think that it's a Neo Geo game. Of course, everyone had the same complaints: not enough levels, and it isn't two-player. Ninja Warriors on Super Nintendo didn't sell amazingly well and has since become something of a rare game for the console. If you're looking to play it now, it got a full remaster titled Ninja Saviors: Return of the Warriors. It has enhanced features like 2 new playable characters, widescreen support, all new graphics, and a 2-player mode. It's available now on Steam and the Nintendo Switch. Another one of those arcade games that almost everybody played makes its way to home console. Released in February 1994 was T2, the arcade game for the Super NES.
Machine gun blasting, molten morphing Terminator 2 video game action in T2, the arcade game, and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now on Super NES, Genesis, and Game Gear.
T2, the arcade game, is a light gun shooter based on the hit movie Terminator 2, start in the post-apocalyptic year of 2029 to shoot down every single menacing robot made by Skynet, then go back to the present year of the early 90s to protect John Connor. Blast every single thing that comes your way, except for the helpful humans of course, and pick up power-ups like restoring health and shotgun ammo. Should John Connor fall in any of the escort levels, you'll lose a bunch of health and have to replay the level again. Protect them all the way to the end and have a final showdown with the T-1000, and do it all in 2-player co-op. T2, the arcade game, is based on the arcade game Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It got a name change for home console release because there was already a game called Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Do not confuse T2 with this game. This game is Terabad. The original arcade game used digitized actors for pretty much everything except the robot Terminators themselves. This meant seeing the movie John Connor and the movie T-1000 throughout. But not Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was too expensive. The home console versions used those exact same graphics, although just really scrunched down. T2, the arcade game, was already released on the Nintendo Game Boy, the Game Gear, the Master System, and the Sega Genesis back in 1992. It even got a special bundle that came with the Sega Menacer. The Super NES version was sold as a standalone, but had some unique features. One, it had better graphics than the Sega counterpart, and you could play using the D-pad to move the cursor around, or using the Super Scope, or you can play it using the SNES mouse to point and click at robots until they blow up. It's nearly impossible to play with the D-pad though, because there's no way you can move the cursor fast enough to shoot the bombardment of enemies on screen all the time. Because it was mostly a light gun game, it didn't get a lot of hyper preview coverage, especially since it was available on Sega for a long time already. Nintendo Power did mention it in their Super Scope Games feature in their December 1993 issue, and that was about it. For reviews, it was seen as fine. Electronic Gaming Monthly's review scores put it in the fine numbers. GamePro magazine called it a pretty good excuse to get a Super Scope, and Nintendo Power gave it an average 3.2 out of 5 score. The console versions of T2, the arcade game, never got any kind of re-release or port. But if you want to play the arcade original, you still can today. You can get a 3/4 arcade-style replica from Arcade 1-Up. And as for everything else released this week, here's Editor Dylan.
This should be a much shorter RFR, unless of course something weird happens. Because the only game released this week that we haven't already covered on a different console is Turn and Burn No Fly Zone for the SNES. We did cover the first game in the series on the Game Boy back in '92. And for those of you who haven't watched every episode of the show, first of all, it's not too late, there's still time, you could fix this. On May 13th, we said,
The game, of course, sucks. It sucks a lot. Quite frankly, probably should not have been made for the Game Boy. The sequel is much better.
and here we are, 2 years later, we've reached the much improved sequel.
Take to the skies with Turn and Burn. No Fly Zone. 16 megs of mind-blowing flight simulation. Take off from your home carrier day or night. Target enemy MiGs with a detailed heads-up display. Then pump them with streams of 50mm ammo, or slam Sidewinder and Phoenix missiles into their tails and send them down in flames. Experience the unparalleled realism of sound barrier blasting dogfights with Turn and Burn. No fly zone for the Super NES.
Since the ad already told us about the game, I don't have to play it and retread what was already explained. So nothing left to do but list off the games we already covered on a different console. Flashback, the quest for identity on the SNES, maintains its impressive cutscene visuals while also maintaining that abysmal frame rate. Night Trap on the 3DO looks noticeably better than the choppy as hell Sega CD version. Why this game was put on the Genesis Mini 2 instead of Snatcher, I'll never understand. Just like I'll never understand why you would pay over $400 for a complete copy of Captain America and the Avengers for the Game Boy. I'd say it's a competent port of the version we already covered, but then this alarm went off of the game, and I thought I did something wrong. Nope, this is just the music. I will say this, if you want to wake someone up, change their alarm to this OST, and they'll likely skip the snooze button because they won't ever want to hear it again. The Game Boy version of Total Carnage might be the best of all the ports this week. If you don't mind very minimal graphics and a lack of music, it still maintains the fun of the original on the go. And our final game released this week was the Game Boy port of Dennis the Menace. This is the only game I myself covered a couple months ago, since there wasn't much more Jared could have said about it than I did. But it was so bad, I actually took his slingshot away from him. Don't ask how, just roll with it. You know, the weapon he's most known for. I mean, look at the box. It's right there, front and center. Slingshot boy.
So let's see how far he gets without this dinky little thing in his possession.
Hang on, someone's at the door. I'll bet it's Dennis. Well. Looking for this? Whoa. Hey, Dennis, is that a gun? Where'd you get that gun, buddy? Look, I got your slingshot right here. It's all yours. You don't want it? I'll just leave it right down there by your Velcro shoes. Dennis, please don't do this. I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want, an apology? I'm sorry, Dennis. I didn't mean it. Now just drop the gun, okay? Drop the gun, Dennis! What else do you want me to say, huh? What else can I say? Well, I could think of one thing. 11 games came out on these consoles this week. Ugh!
Freeze!
Step away from the editor.
Get down! He's packing heat!
Drop the fucking gun, kid. I said drop it now.
This is your final warning. Light him up, boys! Ah! I got him! Quit squirming, kid. You're going down to the station. Get in there. Hey, could you stop by Mickey D's on the way? Happy Meals are $1.99, right? I just need the knuckles to complete the set.
Thank you, Dylan. Here in the Collector's Corner, Alfred Chicken's value is very platform dependent. The cartridge is $13 for the SNES, $18 for the Game Boy, and a whopping $105 for the NES. You get them complete, and they go up to $50, $200, and $400 respectively. The Ninja Warriors is still an obscure one and is this week's biggest value gainer. The game alone is still worth $112, and a complete copy with a box and manual is worth $525. T2, on the other hand, nobody really cares about. It released costing $59.99, and now the game by itself is $12. With the box and manual, it's worth $54. And that's it for today. Once again, February was light on releases, so we'll be taking next week off. But the first Friday of March, we have the first-person shooter Granddaddy, the final beat-em-up of a trilogy, and the yo-yo comes spinning back. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like Dark Cal X, Ink Fused Gamer, and Eric on the keys. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you played any of the games that we mentioned this week, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this show every single Friday. I can't say I ever played T2, the arcade game, on home consoles, and definitely not with a Super Scope or anything. But I did always play it whenever I saw it in the arcades in the 90s, just because it had such a cool cabinet, and the mounted Uzi style gun was so tempting that I just had to hold on to it and shoot it. I never got past the first level. It was impossibly hard.